"Stay close, little one," her grandmother said softly in their native language, her wrinkled hand gently guiding May forward. May nodded, adjusting her thick glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She wished her parents could have come, but their work had made that impossible. Instead, her grandmother had stepped in, insisting that May shouldn't miss this opportunity to see another part of the world. The boarding process felt overwhelming. People pushed forward impatiently, rolling expensive luggage and checking their watches. May noticed how different she looked from the other passengers. Her mismatched clothes, a favorite blue, sweater that was slightly too small, and comfortable pants that had seen better days stood out against the crisp business attire surrounding her. "Boarding pass and passport, please," the gate agent said with a practiced smile. May's grandmother fumbled with their documents, her hands slightly shaking from arthritis. "Could you hurry it up?" A man behind them sighed loudly. "Some of us have connections to make." May quickly helped her grandmother gather their papers. The man rolled his eyes, making no attempt to hide his annoyance. Once on the plane, May and her grandmother made their way down the narrow aisle toward economy class. The backpack felt heavier with each step, and May struggled to keep it from bumping into seats. Her grandmother moved slowly, carefully holding onto each seat as she walked. "Watch it, kid," a businessman snapped when May's backpack accidentally nudged his laptop. He wore an expensive suit and had been typing furiously before the interruption. "Can't parents teach their children manners anymore?" "I'm sorry," May whispered, her cheeks burning. She wanted to explain that her grandmother wasn't her parent, but the words stuck in her throat. They finally reached their seats, a window and middle spot in a row of 3. May helped her grandmother settle into the middle seat before taking the window for herself. She placed her backpack carefully under the seat in front, making sure it wouldn't bother anyone. A fashionably dressed woman with perfectly styled hair approached and checked her ticket twice before reluctantly sitting in the aisle seat, next to May's grandmother. She immediately pulled out a small bottle of perfume and sprayed it around her area, making a show of wrinkling her nose. "I specifically requested not to be seated near children," she murmured into her phone, loud enough for May to hear. "The flight is full? Well, that's just wonderful." May pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the notebook she pulled from her backpack. Its pages were filled with drawings and equations that most people her age wouldn't understand. Her hand moved automatically to a blank page, sketching the outline of an airplane wing with modifications she'd been thinking about for weeks. The pre-flight announcements began, and May noticed her grandmother struggling with the seatbelt. The buckle seemed confusing to her elderly fingers. "Do you need help?" May asked softly. Before her grandmother could answer, the stylish woman sighed dramatically. "It's just a seatbelt. How complicated can it be?" May's grandmother smiled apologetically at the woman and whispered something to May in their language. May nodded and helped secure the seatbelt, ignoring the woman's impatient tapping on her armrest. "What language is that anyway?" the woman asked, not really expecting an answer. So many strange sounds. The businessman from earlier walked past their row, stopping when he recognized May. "Just make sure she doesn't kick my seat," he told May's grandmother, assuming she was a caretaker rather than family. "Kids these days have no respect." May's grandmother nodded politely despite not fully understanding his words. Her English was limited to basic phrases she'd learned especially for this trip. As the plane prepared for takeoff, May pulled out a small container of homemade dumplings her mother had packed for the journey. The familiar smell brought comfort, reminding her of home. "Oh my God," the woman beside them muttered, covering her nose. "What is that smell?" "Couldn't you wait until after takeoff to bring out whatever that is?" May quickly closed the container and tucked it away, her appetite gone. She caught sight of 2 teenagers across the aisle watching and snickering. One lifted his phone, seemingly taking a photo or video of her discomfort. The plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the air. May watched through the window as her hometown grew smaller below them. Despite the excitement of flying, a knot formed in her stomach. 8 more hours of this. 8 hours of feeling like she didn't belong. "Are you okay?" her grandmother asked, noticing May's expression. "I'm fine," May replied softly, "just thinking about the clouds." A flight attendant came by with a beverage cart. "What would you like to drink?" she asked May with a kind smile. "Apple juice, please," May responded. When the attendant turned to her grandmother, the elderly woman looked confused by the unfamiliar drink options. "Water," May suggested to her grandmother, who nodded gratefully. Water, her grandmother repeated with a heavy accent. The flight attendant handed May her juice and gave her grandmother a water bottle. Let me know if you need anything else, she said before moving on. May struggled with the tight cap of her juice, her small fingers slipping on the plastic. When she finally opened it, the plane hit a small pocket of turbulence, causing some juice to splash onto her tray. Careful, the woman next to them exclaimed, quickly lifting her designer purse from the floor. That better not get on my things. I'm sorry, May said, grabbing napkins to clean up the small spill that hadn't gone anywhere near the woman's belongings. The businessman in front turned around with an annoyed expression. Everything okay back there? I felt something hit my seat. Just a little turbulence, May's grandmother explained in broken English. But the man had already turned away, muttering something about babysitting on airplanes. As the flight continued, May noticed more passengers glancing their way whenever her grandmother spoke to her in their native language. An older couple behind them whispered loudly enough for May to hear. They should really speak English if they're traveling internationally. It's just common courtesy. May opened her notebook again, losing herself in her drawings and calculations. It was easier than facing the judgment around her. Her latest project involved improving the efficiency of airplane navigation systems, ironically the very kind of plane she sat in now. But no one around her would guess that the quiet girl with mismatched clothes and thick glasses had already won 2 national science competitions. The in-flight entertainment system flickered to life, and May tried to help her grandmother navigate the unfamiliar technology. After several failed attempts to get her grandmother's screen working, May pressed the call button. Is there a problem? A different flight attendant asked when she arrived. My grandmother's screen isn't turning on, May explained. The flight attendant pressed a few buttons and shook her head. I'm sorry, but this one seems to be malfunctioning. We can try resetting it, but it might not work for this flight. Of course it doesn't work in our row, the woman beside them complained loudly. Just my luck. I can switch seats with someone if you'd like a working screen, the flight attendant offered to May's grandmother. Before her grandmother could respond, the woman jumped in. I'd be happy to move to a seat with a functioning system. I was speaking to this passenger, the flight attendant clarified, gesturing to May's grandmother. She probably doesn't even care about the screen, the woman replied. I doubt she knows how to use it anyway. May's grandmother seemed to understand the tone, if not all the words. She shook her head gently. We stay here. No problem, she said with dignity. The flight attendant nodded and left, promising to check back later. The woman huffed and put on her own headphones, deliberately turning away from them. May felt her eyes sting with held-back tears. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small tablet, offering one earbud to her grandmother. On the screen was a documentary about ocean life that they had downloaded before the trip, her grandmother's favorite subject. As they watched together, sharing this small moment of joy amid the discomfort, May didn't notice the businessman take a photo of them, adding it to a social media post about travel nightmares that was already gathering laughing reactions. She didn't know that in a few hours everything would change, that the very people mocking her would soon regret ever having underestimated the quiet girl with the star-covered backpack and her elderly grandmother. For now, May simply held her grandmother's hand and watched colorful fish swim across the small screen, finding escape in their silent, graceful movements, so unlike the harsh, judgmental world of the airplane cabin surrounding them. I've written the first part of the story as requested. I used simple language while keeping it engaging and interesting, following these guidelines. May's peaceful moment didn't last long. The plane suddenly shuddered, dropping slightly before stabilizing. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. May jerked awake, disoriented. Her half-empty cup of apple juice that had been sitting on her tray table tipped over, spilling across the surface and dripping onto the floor before she could catch it. Oh no, she gasped, grabbing for napkins. Seriously. The woman in the aisle seat pulled her feet back sharply. Those are $300 shoes. May's grandmother tried to help, but her movements were slow. The businessman in front turned around, his face twisted with annoyance. What's happening back there? He spotted the spilled juice and rolled his eyes. Great, now it's probably soaking into my seat. I'm really sorry, May said, her voice small as she dabbed at the mess. It was the turbulence. A flight attendant hurried over with more napkins and a plastic bag for the wet ones. She smiled kindly at May. Don't worry, accidents happen. Especially during turbulence, the businessman wasn't satisfied. Excuse me, he called to the flight attendant. Is there any chance I could change seats? I paid a premium for this flight and I'm trying to get work done. The flight attendant glanced around the full cabin. I'm sorry, sir, but we're completely booked. Every seat is occupied. Perfect, he muttered, turning back around with an exaggerated sigh. From across the aisle, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and expensive-looking clothes had been recording the entire incident on her phone. She whispered to her companion just loud enough for May to hear. This is gold for my Travel Nightmares series. Hashtag kids on planes, hashtag why I fly private usually. Heat crept up May's neck and into her cheeks. She wished she could disappear into her seat. Her grandmother patted her hand, saying something comforting in their language, but this only drew more attention. Could they at least speak English? Someone muttered from the row behind. It's so rude when you don't know what they're saying about you. The plane continued to bump through patches of rough air. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated, but once the worst of the turbulence passed, passengers began moving around again. The businessman got up to use the restroom, making a point to examine his seat for any sign of juice before sitting back down. Look at this, he said to the passenger next to him, holding up his hand. My seat is damp. Just great. May stared out the window, trying to focus on the endless blue sky instead of the uncomfortable atmosphere inside the cabin. Her grandmother had dozed off, her head tilted at an uncomfortable-looking angle. May carefully adjusted the airline pillow to support her grandmother's neck, a small act of care that went unnoticed by everyone except a young boy peeking through the seats from the row behind. When the in-flight meal service began, May gently woke her grandmother. The flight attendant reached their row and presented two options. We have chicken with rice or pasta with vegetables, she explained. May's grandmother looked confused by the options, the language barrier making the simple choice difficult. Chicken? May suggested, pointing to one of the trays. Her grandmother nodded. And for you? The flight attendant asked May. Pasta, please. As they received their meals, May noticed her grandmother examining the unfamiliar food with uncertainty. The elderly woman carefully opened the foil cover and poked at the chicken with her plastic fork. Is there something wrong with the meal? The woman in the aisle seat asked with obvious irritation. Your grandmother keeps staring at it like it's going to attack her. Some people aren't used to airplane food, May replied quietly. She's just being careful. Well, it's distracting. May turned to her grandmother and explained the different items on the tray in their language. The woman next to them made a show of putting in earbuds, as if the foreign language was offensive to her ears. After they finished eating, or in her grandmother's case, politely moving the food around without eating much, May's entertainment system suddenly went dark. She pressed several buttons, but the screen remained blank. Excuse me, she called softly when a flight attendant passed by. My screen isn't working anymore. The attendant tried to reset it without success. I'm sorry, it seems the whole system in this section is having issues. Our technicians are aware and working on it. The stylish woman across the aisle who had been recording earlier laughed. First the spilled drink, now the entertainment system. Cursed row much? Her companion snickered. At least we've got our own entertainment watching them. May pretended not to hear as she reached for her backpack under the seat. She pulled out a tablet, but instead of returning to the documentary she had been watching with her grandmother, she opened a different application, the screen filled with lines of code and complex mathematical formulas. The businessman, returning from another trip to the restroom, paused in the aisle and glanced at her screen. He raised his eyebrows. Playing computer games? He asked with a condescending smile. My daughter loves those coding games too. They make kids feel like real programmers. May didn't correct him. She didn't explain that what he was seeing wasn't a game but actual work she had been doing for months. Algorithms designed to improve flight navigation systems. Instead, she simply nodded and turned the screen slightly away from his view. Nerdy kid playing scientist. The man behind her whispered to his wife. Remember when our son went through that phase? Had a toy chemistry set and thought he was Einstein. His wife laughed. Kids and their imaginations. As May continued working, her grandmother woke up and watched her with obvious pride. She said something that made May smile, the first genuine smile since they had boarded the plane. What language is that anyway? The aisle seat woman asked, her curiosity momentarily overcoming her annoyance. It's Vietnamese, May answered. The woman replied, clearly losing interest already. You speak English very well for your age. I was born in America, May explained, though she felt no obligation to share her personal history with someone who had been unkind. Oh. The woman seemed surprised. But your grandmother wasn't? No, she came here later. The conversation died as quickly as it had started. The woman returned to her magazine and May to her tablet. But now others were watching her more closely, perhaps seeing her differently after learning she was American-born. A new wave of turbulence hit, stronger than before. Drinks rattled on trays and overhead bins creaked. The captain's voice returned, more serious this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some stronger turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please suspend service and secure the cabin. The plane dropped suddenly, then bobbed up like a cork in water. Several passengers gasped. A few items fell from poorly secured bags. May's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor and sliding several rows ahead. My tablet, she cried, automatically reaching to unbuckle her seatbelt. Her grandmother placed a firm hand on her arm, shaking her head. Stay, she said in English, one of the few words she knew well. The businessman noticed the tablet near his feet. He picked it up, glancing at the screen before it went dark. For a moment, his expression changed. Confusion replacing condescension as he glimpsed something unexpected in those lines of code. But the moment passed quickly as another jolt of turbulence shook the plane. I'll return it when the seatbelt sign goes off, he called back to May, tucking the tablet into the seat pocket in front of him. The turbulence continued for 20 tense minutes. May sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, occasionally checking on her grandmother, who remained surprisingly calm despite the rough flight. The older woman had seen much worse in her lifetime than unpleasant airplane rides. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off, the businessman stood and brought May's tablet back to her. He handed it over with slightly more respect than before. That doesn't look like any game I've seen, he remarked. What exactly are you working on? Before May could answer, the woman with the phone interrupted. Are you seriously asking a 12-year-old about computer code? She's probably just copying something she saw on TV. The businessman frowned, but moved on without further comment. Mai unlocked her tablet, relieved to find it undamaged, and checked that her work had been saved. A flight attendant walked through the cabin, stopping at their row. The entertainment system reset hasn't worked for this section. We apologize for the inconvenience. We'll be offering complimentary headphones for anyone who wishes to use their personal devices. As the attendant distributed headphones, May noticed her grandmother was looking pale. Are you okay? She asked in Vietnamese. Her grandmother nodded but pressed a hand on her chest, taking deep breaths. Does she need something? The flight attendant asked, noticing the concern on May's face. I think she's just tired, May replied, not wanting to cause more trouble. The flight attendant smiled kindly. We still have 5 hours before we land. Try to get some rest. As the attendant moved on, the social media woman across the aisle was recording again. Her phone pointed in their direction while she whispered commentary. More passengers were watching now, some with pity, others with continued annoyance. But May sensed something else too. A subtle shift in the businessman's attitude. A curious glance from a woman a few rows ahead who had noticed the complex work on her tablet. The social media woman across the aisle had finally stopped filming them and was now scrolling through her phone, occasionally chuckling at her own cleverness as she added captions to the videos she'd taken. The businessman had put on an eye mask and reclined his seat as far as it would go, which wasn't much in economy class. A flight attendant passed through, checking on passengers and collecting trash. She paused at May's row, noticing the elderly woman's discomfort. Is your grandmother feeling all right? She asked quietly. May looked up from her tablet. I think she's just tired, she replied, though concern flickered across her face. The flight is long for her. Would you like me to bring her some water or tea? Water would be nice, thank you. The flight attendant nodded and continued down the aisle. When she returned with the water, May gently woke her grandmother, who took a few careful sips. Thank you, the elderly woman said in accented English. The flight attendant smiled warmly in response. As she walked away, the plane suddenly shuddered. Not the usual turbulence they'd experienced earlier, but something different. A strange mechanical sound followed by an unusual vibration. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. A few passengers looked up in concern. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties with one of our systems. There's absolutely no cause for alarm. But as a precaution, we ask that all passengers return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts." A murmur spread through the cabin. The businessman removed his eye mask, suddenly alert. The woman beside May's grandmother sat up straighter, her magazine forgotten. "What kind of technical difficulties?" someone asked loudly. A flight attendant walked briskly through the cabin, checking seatbelts. "Just a routine issue," she assured passengers. "The captain has everything under control." But May noticed the flight attendants exchanging glances, their professional smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Something was wrong, more than they were letting on. 10 minutes passed. The strange vibration continued, a subtle but persistent tremor that ran through the floor of the plane. Passengers shifted uneasily in their seats. Some gripped their armrests. Others tried to appear unconcerned. Then another announcement. "This is your captain again. We're continuing to address the technical issue. As an additional precaution, I'd like to ask if there are any passengers with medical training on board. If so, please press your call button." Now the cabin buzzed with tension. Medical training? Why would they need that if it was just a minor technical problem? 2 call buttons lit up. A middle-aged woman 4 rows ahead identified herself as a nurse. An older man in business class was a retired doctor. They were quietly escorted to the front of the plane by flight attendants. "Are we in danger?" the aisle seat woman asked no one in particular. Her earlier disdain replaced by nervousness. "Why do they need doctors?" "Probably just a passenger who got sick," someone suggested. "Maybe motion sickness from the turbulence." May's grandmother had fully woken now. She watched the activity at the front of the plane with a calm, assessing gaze that seemed at odds with her frail appearance. She said something to May in Vietnamese, her voice low. May nodded and replied quietly. The two had a brief conversation that drew curious glances from nearby passengers. 5 minutes later, another announcement came. But this time it wasn't the captain. It was the co-pilot, his voice steady but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation that requires specialized assistance. We're looking for anyone on board with advanced engineering or computer science experience, particularly in navigation systems or aircraft software. If you have relevant expertise, please press your call button immediately." The cabin fell silent. This was definitely not routine. The businessman frowned. "Navigation systems? That doesn't sound good." No call buttons lit up. Passengers looked around, hoping someone would volunteer. May's grandmother straightened in her seat. She turned to May and spoke firmly in Vietnamese, gesturing toward the front of the plane. May shook her head, suddenly looking very young and unsure. "I can't," she whispered back in English. "They won't believe me." Her grandmother took May's hand, squeezing it gently. She spoke again, her tone leaving no room for argument. After a moment, May nodded reluctantly. She reached for the call button above her seat and pressed it. The woman in the aisle seat stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "They need an engineer, not a child." A flight attendant hurried to their row. "Yes, did you need something?" May's grandmother spoke up, her English halting but clear. "My granddaughter. She can help." The flight attendant looked confused. "I'm sorry." "She knows computers. Aircraft systems. Very smart." The woman next to them scoffed. "Are you serious? She's playing games on her tablet and you think she can help with the plane?" The flight attendant smiled politely. "That's very kind, but we're looking for someone with professional experience in—" "I've worked with Boeing's navigation software," May interrupted, her voice small but steady. "I developed a patch for their GPS routing systems that they implemented last year." The flight attendant's smile froze. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "My name is Mei Lin," she continued, gaining confidence. "I'm part of the Young Innovators program. Last year, I created an algorithm that helps planes navigate more efficiently through storm systems." The businessman, who had been listening with increasing interest, leaned over the back of his seat. "Are you joking? You're telling us you, a kid, designed software for Boeing?" Before May could respond, her grandmother reached into her purse and pulled out an ID card, which she handed to the flight attendant. The woman examined it, her eyes widening. "This says you're Dr. Nguyen, from Johns Hopkins Medical Center." The grandmother nodded. "I am doctor, cardiologist. I come to help with medical emergency. And my granddaughter, she can help with plane." The flight attendant looked from the ID to May, then back to the grandmother. "Just one moment, please." She hurried to the front of the cabin where she spoke urgently with another crew member. Passengers watched with growing interest. The woman who had been filming May earlier had her phone out again, but this time her expression was confused rather than mocking. The head flight attendant approached their row, followed by a man in a pilot's uniform, the co-pilot, Dr. Nguyen. He addressed the elderly woman respectfully. "We have a passenger experiencing chest pains. The doctor on board has requested another opinion if you wouldn't mind." May's grandmother nodded and carefully unbuckled her seatbelt. The woman in the aisle seat quickly moved to let her out, all previous irritation gone. The co-pilot then turned to May. "And you're May Lin?" She nodded nervously. "Our chief pilot recognized your name when the flight attendant mentioned it. He said to ask if you're the same May Lin who submitted that paper to the International Aviation Technology Conference last month, about adaptive navigation protocols." May nodded again, color rising in her cheeks. "We could use your help," he said simply. "We're having an issue with our navigation system that matches some of the scenarios you described in your paper." A murmur spread through the cabin as passengers processed what was happening. The businessman's mouth had fallen open. The social media woman had stopped recording, her phone forgotten in her hand. "She's just a kid," someone said. "Did he say she wrote a paper for an aviation conference? Her grandmother is a doctor at Johns Hopkins." The co-pilot addressed the curious passengers. "Everything is under control, folks. We just have some excellent resources on board that we'd like to utilize." He turned back to May. "Would you mind coming with me to the cockpit? The captain would like to consult with you." May gathered her tablet and notebook. As she stood, she glanced around at the passengers who had been mocking her just hours earlier. Their faces showed varying degrees of shock, confusion, and embarrassment. The businessman couldn't meet her eyes. The social media woman stared openly, all smugness gone. As May followed the co-pilot toward the front of the plane, she heard the aisle C. The woman asked her seatmate, "Did you know?" "How could we have known?" The cockpit door opened to admit her. Inside, the captain nodded in greeting. "May Lin? I'm Captain Rivera. Thank you for coming. We've got a situation with our navigation system that I think you might understand better than anyone else on this plane." He gestured to a screen displaying a complex set of data. "Our primary GPS is functioning, but we're getting some strange feedback in the routing algorithm. It started about 20 minutes ago and none of the standard resets are working." May studied the screen, her earlier nervousness replaced by focused concentration. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to her tablet. "Of course." She quickly connected her tablet to the plane's system, a procedure that would normally be against all protocols but was allowed under these unusual circumstances. "I think I see the problem," she said. After a few minutes of examination, "The navigation system is getting caught in a feedback loop. It's similar to an issue I identified in my research." As May worked, the captain watched with growing respect. This girl, who had been dismissed and mocked by passengers, was now confidently troubleshooting a system that had stumped the flight crew. Meanwhile, in the first-class cabin, Dr. Nguyen was bent over an elderly passenger, listening to his heart with a stethoscope provided from the plane's medical kit. The retired doctor stood nearby, nodding as Dr. Nguyen spoke in her accented but precise English. "Not heart attack," she concluded. "Panic attack with chest wall inflammation. Very painful, very scary, but not dangerous." She prepared a simple treatment from the supplies available and spoke soothingly to the frightened passenger. Back in economy class, word had spread quickly. The same passengers who had complained about May and her grandmother were now talking about them with astonishment. "The kid is some kind of genius," the businessman told his seatmate. "And I treated her like a nuisance." The social media woman scrolled through her phone, deleting the mocking videos she'd taken earlier. Her face burned with shame. In the cockpit, May finished implementing her solution. "Try it now," she told the captain. He tested the navigation system and his face broke into a relieved smile. "It's working perfectly. You just saved us from having to make an emergency landing." He extended his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Lin. Boeing wasn't exaggerating when they said you were one of the brightest young minds in aviation technology." May blushed at the praise. "I'm just glad I could help." As she left the cockpit to return to her seat, passengers watched her with new eyes. The same people who had seen only a clumsy, awkward girl now saw a young genius. The same grandmother they had dismissed as a confused old woman was actually a respected cardiologist. Her grandmother was still helping the passenger with chest pains, so May sat alone. The woman in the aisle seat who had been so dismissive earlier now smiled at her awkwardly. "That was impressive," the woman said. "I had no idea you were—" She trailed off, clearly struggling to find the right words. May nodded politely but said nothing. She opened her notebook and began writing, partly to avoid conversation and partly because she had new ideas about the navigation system after seeing it in action. The businessman turned around in his seat. "Excuse me," he said, his tone completely different from before. "I couldn't help overhearing. You developed software for Boeing? At your age?" May looked up. "Yes, it started as a school project, but then my teacher sent it to a competition." "That's extraordinary," he said. His face showed genuine interest now, with no trace of the condescension from earlier. "I work in tech myself. Nothing as impressive as aviation systems, just business software, but—" He extended his hand. "Tom Chen, Horizon Solutions. I'd love to hear more about your work." May shook his hand briefly. "Nice to meet you." More passengers were watching now, whispering to each other. A young flight attendant approached with a glass of orange juice. "The captain asked me to bring you this," she said with a warm smile, "and to thank you again for your help." "Thank you," May replied quietly. The flight attendant leaned closer. "I just wanted to say what you did was amazing. I'm studying engineering myself, taking night classes while working here. You're an inspiration." May blushed. "I just like solving problems." As the flight attendant moved away, the social media woman across the aisle cleared her throat. "Hey," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Those videos I took earlier, I've deleted them all. I want you to know that." May nodded but didn't respond. The woman continued awkwardly. "I was being really unfair. I didn't know who you were." "Would it have made a difference?" May asked softly. "If I wasn't who I am, would it have been okay to make fun of me then?" The woman opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no good answer. A gentle hand touched May's shoulder. Her grandmother had returned and was standing in the aisle. The passenger who had been beside them quickly stood to let Dr. Nguyen back to her seat. "Is the passenger okay?" May asked in Vietnamese as her grandmother settled in. "Yes," she replied. "Not a heart attack. He will be fine." The businessman turned around again. "Excuse me, doctor. I'm sorry I didn't catch your full name." "Dr. Nguyen," she said simply. "Dr. Nguyen, I just wanted to say thank you for helping. My father had a heart attack last year on a cruise ship. If it weren't for a doctor who happened to be on board—" He shook his head. "Well, we need more people like you in the world." Dr. Nguyen smiled and nodded. "I do my job," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rivera speaking. I wanted to update you on our situation. Thanks to the assistance of one of our passengers, the technical issue with our navigation system has been fully resolved. We will be continuing to our destination as planned, with an estimated arrival time of 6:15 p.m. local time." He paused before adding, "I'd like to extend my personal thanks to Ms. Mei Lin, a 12-year-old passenger who happens to be a brilliant young engineer. Her expertise was invaluable today. We're also fortunate to have Dr. Thuy Nguyen on board, who assisted with a medical situation. This is a reminder that extraordinary people are often found in ordinary places, and appearances can be deceiving. Thank you both for your help." A spontaneous round of applause broke out in the cabin. May sank lower in her seat, her face burning with embarrassment. Her grandmother patted her hand reassuringly. "You did good," she said in Vietnamese. "Be proud." As the applause died down, a young boy about 8 years old peeked through the gap between seats from the row behind. "Did you really fix the plane?" he asked May, his eyes wide with wonder. "Just part of it," May replied. "The navigation system. Cool." The boy grinned. "I want to build planes when I grow up." "You can," May said, smiling for the first time since boarding the flight. "Start with paper ones. That's how I began." The boy's mother leaned forward. "I'm so sorry for how some passengers treated you earlier. My son kept telling me you were doing something amazing on your tablet, but I thought he was exaggerating." "Kids notice things adults miss sometimes," May replied. Throughout the cabin, the mood had shifted dramatically. Passengers who had ignored or mocked May now tried to catch glimpses of the young genius. Some looked ashamed, others fascinated. A few pulled out phones to search for information about the young aviation expert mentioned in the captain's announcement. The businessman was on his phone too. Unbelievable, he muttered to his seatmate. She's mentioned in Aviation Weekly as one of the 20 under 20 to watch in aerospace technology. The woman who had filmed May was now typing furiously on her phone. I'm so embarrassed, she said to her companion. I posted those mocking videos to my story before I deleted them. Now my followers are calling me out for being mean to a literal genius. For the next hour, passengers came up with various excuses to walk past May's row, curious to see the girl who had helped save the flight. Some nodded respectfully, others smiled or waved. A few stopped to ask questions, which May answered politely but briefly. A flight attendant approached again, this time with the co-pilot. May, the co-pilot said. The captain was wondering if you'd like to see more of the cockpit systems before we begin our descent. It's not something we usually offer, but given your expertise, May looked at her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. Go, Dr. Nguyen said. Learn. As May followed the co-pilot to the front of the plane again, the businessman turned to Dr. Nguyen. Your granddaughter is remarkable, he said. You must be very proud. Dr. Nguyen smiled. Yes, very proud. But sad too. Sad, why? People see only outside, she replied, touching her wrinkled face and gesturing to her simple clothes. Judge quickly. Miss what is inside. She tapped her temple and then her heart. The important things. The businessman looked down, properly chastised. You're right. I was one of those people today. I saw a young girl and an elderly woman and made assumptions. He shook his head. I should know better. We all learn, Dr. Nguyen said kindly. Every day, chance to do better. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, May was getting a detailed tour of the aircraft systems. Captain Rivera pointed out various displays and controls, explaining how they work together. Your navigation patch is performing beautifully, he told her. The way you stabilized the feedback loop was elegant, better than our standard procedures. Thank you, May said, absorbing everything with bright eyes. I have some ideas for making it even more resilient against cascade failures. The captain laughed. I believe you do. Have you considered what you want to do when you finish school? Boeing or Airbus would be lucky to have you. May thought for a moment. I want to make transportation safer for everyone. Not just planes, but all kinds of vehicles. My parents work long hours and they drive tired sometimes. I worry about them. The captain nodded thoughtfully. A worthy goal. The world needs more problem solvers like you. When May returned to her seat, she found several passengers waiting to speak with her. A teacher from a nearby row asked if she would be willing to talk to his class via video chat someday about engineering. A mother wanted advice for her daughter who loved math but was losing confidence. The businessman handed her a business card with his contact information. If you ever need mentorship or resources for your projects, please reach out, he said. My company would be honored to support your work. The social media woman approached last, looking genuinely contrite. I made a new post, she said, showing May her phone, explaining how wrong I was to judge you and your grandmother. I'm using my platform to talk about prejudice and hasty judgments. She hesitated. I understand if you don't forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to learn from my mistake. May studied the post, which had already received thousands of likes and supportive comments. Thank you for being honest, she said finally. That's a good start. As the plane began its initial descent, announcements came on about preparing for landing. The excitement in the cabin gradually settled, but the atmosphere remained completely transformed. The same passengers who had once been irritated by May's presence now treated her with deference and respect. Dr. Nguyen observed it all with quiet wisdom. When the plane dipped through the clouds and the city of Lahore came into view below, she leaned close to her granddaughter. See how quickly they change, she said in Vietnamese. But the real question is, will they remember this lesson tomorrow when they meet someone else who seems different? May looked out at the sprawling city below, thinking about her grandmother's words. Some will, she replied. Maybe that's enough to start changing things. The businessman, overhearing their exchange without understanding the words, watched them with newfound respect. He took out his phone and canceled the social media post he had made earlier about his travel nightmare sitting behind a clumsy child. Instead, he began typing a new message about assumptions, humility, and the extraordinary 12-year-old engineer who had taught him a valuable lesson at 30,000 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, Welcome to Lahore International Airport, the captain's voice announced. Local time is 6:23 p.m. and the temperature is a pleasant 75 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign has been turned off. May looked out the window, taking in her first glimpse of Pakistan. Her grandmother placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Ready?" Dr. Nguyen asked in Vietnamese. May nodded, though she felt a flutter of nervousness. After the events of the flight, she wasn't sure what to expect when they left the plane. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, the captain made one final announcement. "Before we part ways, I'd like to once again thank Ms. Mei Lin and Dr. Nguyen for their assistance during our flight. It's been an honor having you both on board. For those interested, Dr. Nguyen will be conducting a groundbreaking cardiac procedure at Lahore General Hospital this week, and Ms. Lin will be presenting at the International Youth Science Conference tomorrow morning." Whispers spread through the cabin as passengers processed this additional information. The social media woman was already searching on her phone for details about the conference. "It's the biggest youth science event in Asia," she told her companion. "Says here that May is the youngest keynote speaker in the conference's history." When the seatbelt sign finally turned off, passengers stood and began retrieving luggage from the overhead bins. But instead of the usual rush to exit, something unusual happened. People stepped back, creating a path in the aisle. The flight attendant approached May and her grandmother. "The captain has arranged for you to deplane first, if that's all right. There are some people waiting for you at the gate." Dr. Nguyen looked surprised but nodded. She gathered her small handbag while May collected her backpack with the hand-drawn stars. As they moved toward the exit, passengers smiled and nodded respectfully. Some even applauded softly. The businessman who had complained about May earlier stopped them at his row. "Dr. Nguyen, Ms. Lin," he said formally. "I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was inexcusable." Dr. Nguyen smiled gently. "We all make mistakes. Important thing is learning." "I have learned," he assured her. "More than you know." He handed May a business card. "My company sponsors technology scholarships. When you're ready for college, any college you want, call me. It would be our privilege to support your education." May took the card, surprised. "Thank you," she said quietly. As they continued toward the front of the plane, more passengers offered words of appreciation or respect. The woman who had filmed May stood awkwardly in the aisle. "My post about what happened has gone viral," she said, showing them her phone. "Thousands of comments. People are sharing stories about times they judged others unfairly." She hesitated. "Would it be okay to tag you? Or mention your name? You could reach so many people with your story." May shook her head. "I'd rather not. But thank you for using your platform to talk about this." The flight attendants at the door thanked them warmly as they left the aircraft. "It was a pleasure having you on our flight," the lead attendant said. "Though next time perhaps we can know about your expertise before we have an emergency." She smiled to show she was joking. As they stepped into the jetway, May turned to her grandmother. "That was strange," she said in Vietnamese. "This morning they treated us like we were nothing. Now they act like we're special." Her grandmother nodded wisely. "People see title, achievement, recognition, and still looking at outside things, just different ones now." She squeezed May's hand. "Real respect sees the person first, before knowing what they can do." At the gate, a small delegation waited. A woman in a business suit held a sign reading, "Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Lin." Beside her stood a man in hospital scrubs and several excited-looking teenagers wearing conference badges. "Dr. Nguyen." The man in scrubs stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Patel from Lahore General. It's an honor to welcome you. We've been preparing for your arrival for weeks." One of the teenagers approached May shyly. "You're May Lin? Your paper on adaptive navigation systems was amazing. We've been studying it in our robotics club." As introductions continued, May noticed passengers from their flight watching from a distance. The businessman was on his phone, looking thoughtful. The social media woman was typing rapidly on her device. The mother of the boy who wanted to build airplanes was pointing May out to her son, who waved enthusiastically. The delegation escorted them through the airport, helping with immigration and collecting their luggage. Dr. Patel explained the schedule for the week. Dr. Nguyen's groundbreaking procedure, May's keynote address, meetings with local students and officials. As they approached the exit, The businessman from the flight hurried to catch up with them. "Excuse me," he called. "One more thing." They paused, and he caught his breath. "I just got off the phone with my company's board. We'd like to establish a scholarship in both your names, the Nguyen Lin Innovation Fund. It would support young people, especially girls pursuing careers in medicine and technology." He looked directly at May. "Your experience today, well, it made me realize how many brilliant minds might be overlooked because of assumptions and prejudice." Dr. Nguyen considered this, then nodded. "Good idea, but one condition." "Anything," the businessman agreed eagerly. "Must include students who have no awards, no recognition yet. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones. Find them." The businessman nodded solemnly. "I understand. That's exactly the point." Outside the airport, a line of cars waited. Before they got into their assigned vehicle, May noticed a family struggling with luggage, a mother with 3 small children looking overwhelmed as she tried to find transportation. Without hesitation, May approached Dr. Patel. "Could we offer them a ride? They seem to need help." Dr. Patel looked surprised but quickly agreed. The mother was hesitant at first but gratefully accepted once the situation was explained. As they all settled into the large car, the woman thanked them repeatedly. "This is so kind of you," she said. "Most people wouldn't notice someone like me." Dr. Nguyen smiled. "My granddaughter notices everyone. That is her special gift, more important than any other." The drive into the city took them through busy streets as evening fell. Lights began to twinkle in buildings and along roadways. The children in the car peppered May with questions about America, her favorite foods, and whether she liked Pakistani sweets. It was the most normal conversation she'd had all day. When they dropped the family at their destination, the mother pressed something into May's hand, a small, intricately woven bracelet. "A welcome gift," she explained, "made by my grandmother." May slipped it onto her wrist, touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful. Thank you." Back in the car, Dr. Patel checked his phone and laughed in surprise. "Have you seen this?" he asked, showing them the screen. "The hashtag #don't judge by appearances is trending worldwide. It seems your flight has sparked quite a conversation." On the screen was a post from the social media woman, detailing what had happened on the flight without naming May or her grandmother. Thousands of comments and shares had followed, with people adding their own stories of being misjudged or learning to look beyond appearances. "Your experience has touched many people," Dr. Patel said. May looked out the window at the unfamiliar city rolling by. "I just wanted to be treated normally," she said quietly. Her grandmother patted her hand. "Normal is good. But what happened today, maybe it helps others see more clearly." Your discomfort became teaching moment. As they arrived at their hotel, staff came out to greet them. News of the prominent doctor and young genius had preceded them. May was tired of the attention, but she smiled politely as they were escorted to their rooms. Once alone, May flopped onto the bed, exhausted. Her grandmother sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. "Long day," Dr. Nguyen said. "You did well." "I didn't do anything special," May protested. "I just helped fix a problem. Anyone with the knowledge would have done the same." "Not just that," her grandmother corrected. "You stayed kind when others were not. You helped family at airport when you could have enjoyed being important. You refused to shame those who shamed you." She smiled. "These things matter more than fixing planes." May thought about this as she unpacked her notebook. She opened to a fresh page and began sketching a new idea, not for planes or navigation systems, but for a simple app that could translate languages in real time, helping people like her grandmother communicate more easily when traveling. The next morning, as she prepared for her conference speech, May received a message. The airline captain had sent a photo of the cockpit crew along with a note. "Thank you for reminding us all that brilliance comes in all forms, and that we should always look beyond appearances. Your generation gives me hope for the future." Attached was a special invitation for May to visit their training facility whenever she wished. She showed it to her grandmother, who was dressing for her hospital visit. Dr. Nguyen nodded approvingly. Good man, that captain. He saw you, really saw you, even before he knew who you were. May thought about this as she put on her conference outfit, still her own style, but neater for the important day. She left her star-covered backpack exactly as it was, worn edges and all. It had become something of a symbol to her now. As they left their hotel room, Dr. Nguyen paused. Remember, little one, no matter what they say today, no matter how they praise you, the most important thing is not what you know or what you can do,